Let's go ahead and learn the next two measures of the Farmhouse. This is the song I've been teaching you the last couple lessons. So here is what we have learned together so far. And then what comes next with our right hand, we'll learn the right hand, we're going to go back to this interval of a third, and then that interval of a third. So let's do that again. One more time. With your left hand, all we're going to do is to play the C alongside the intervals that we're playing with our right hand. Okay, watch that again. And I will play it one more time. And next lesson, we will learn the final two measures of this song. Let's go ahead and review the interval of a fourth. So here is a fourth on my piano. And we have two options for fingerings. This is one of them. And here's the other option. Here is another fourth on my piano. And the other fingering. Remember, a fourth is 4 sounds apart. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 sounds apart. Why don't you take a moment and find a few intervals of fourths on your piano? Now let's work on an interval by ear. So I want you to close your eyes. Let's see if you can identify this interval with your eyes closed. This is either a second, third, fourth, or fifth. Here it is again. I'll play it one more time. Go ahead and open your eyes and you will see that I am playing the interval of a fifth. At our last lesson, we drew ladders together, and you drew even more ladders for homework. These are simply a series of lines, and as long as we know one sound on one of the lines, we can always figure out the sounds of the rest of the lines, because we know that the lines represent intervals of thirds. So we kind of look forward at music, and we're like, well, wouldn't it just be way better or so much better if these sounds and lines and spaces were always the same notes or represented the same sounds? We're going to do that now. We're going to draw an 11-lined ladder, and this ladder is going to represent the sounds that we use most often when we play the piano. And the sounds that we use most often when we play the piano are all the sounds right in the middle of the keyboard. So I want you to take a minute and I want you to draw an 11-lined ladder. Now that you've drawn an 11-lined ladder, I am going to tell you the sound of one of those lines. And since I'm going to tell you one of those lines, I know that you're going to be able to figure out the rest of the names of all the lines. So when we look at 11 lines, that's a lot of lines to look at and kind of divide up in our head. So we're going to take the very middle line and shorten it to just be a small little line, and it's going to look like this. So whether you used a pencil and paper or a whiteboard, I want you to change the middle line of your ladder and make it a short line just like I did on my 11 lined ladder. And I'm going to tell you the name of that little short line. The name of that little short line is middle C. Okay, middle C is the middlemost C on our piano. And you can see I have the name of my piano right here. A lot of us have names of pianos right about here on our pianos. That's sometimes a good indication that it's the middle of your piano. So go to your piano, find your middlemost C, and it should sound like my middle C as well. This 11-lined ladder that you've drawn with the short line in the middle, this is what we call our staff. So going forward, I'm going to call this picture, these 11 lines, our staff. Now that we've drawn our staff, let's discover together how high and how low the staff goes. So go back to our middle C line. Okay, we know where our little middle C line is, and we know where it's at on the piano. So how many lines are above middle C? We have 5 lines above middle C. And since we know that each one of those lines represents the interval of a third, what sound on the piano is going to represent the highest line on our staff? Okay, think about that for a minute. So if there's 5 lines above middle C, how do we figure out the highest line of the staff? Why don't you take a minute at your piano and see if you can count up intervals of thirds. Do that 5 times in a row and see if you can figure out what the highest line of the staff is. So if we know this is middle C, and we know on our staff that there's 5 lines above middle C, so we count up in thirds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We discover that the top line, or the highest line on our staff, is high F. So we're going to call this high F. Let's see if we can do the same thing and discover what the lowest line is on our staff. So once again, if we count the lines below middle C, as you already likely know, there are 5 lines below middle C on our staff as well. So why don't you go to your piano and see if you can figure out what the lowest line on the staff represents. So if we know that this is middle C again, and we count down 5 times with an interval of a third, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we discover that the lowest line on our staff is low G. So we're going to call this low G. So now if we're looking at our 11-lined staff, we now know 3 sounds on the staff. We know middle C, and that one's pretty easy to find because we know it's always going to fall on the little line in the very middle of the staff. And then we know the top line of the staff is high F, and now we've just learned that the lowest line on the staff is low G. So with our 11-line staff, we have now identified what we call middle C. And as you learned the span of the staff, we've also identified high F and low G. So I want you to close your eyes, and I'm either going to play high F, middle C, or low G. Let's see if we can identify one of these sounds, or these sounds, let's see if we can identify them with our eyes closed. So go ahead and close your eyes, and I'm going to play a sound, and I want you to determine, with your eyes closed, if it's high F, middle C, or low G. Which is this one? Go ahead and open your eyes, and you will see that I'm playing high F. Go ahead and close your eyes again. Which sound am I playing now? Go ahead and open your eyes, and you will see that I am playing low G. And let's do one more. Go ahead and close your eyes. What sound am I playing now? Go ahead and open your eyes, and you will see that I am playing middle C. Go ahead and draw an 11-lined staff on the paper, or maybe a small whiteboard in front of you, and I'm going to play either high F, middle C, or low G on the piano, and I want you to draw that note on your staff. So take a moment and draw an 11-lined staff. Go ahead and draw this note, or this sound, on the staff in front of you. How about this one? Go ahead and draw this sound on the staff in front of you. How about this one? Draw this one on the staff in front of you. And let's talk about 3-pulse notes today. There are a couple different ways that we can write a 3-pulse note. Remember, a 3-pulse note is a note that lasts for 3 pulses. So as we sing tas with our notes, as we sing a 3-pulse note, we would sing ta, ta, ta. So one of the ways that we could write 3 pulses is like this. We could draw 3 1-pulse notes and tie them together with our ties. So once we've tied them together, we hold 3 pulses of a note. The other way to write a 3-pulse note is to draw a 2-pulse note and a 1-pulse note and connect those 2 notes together. So when we see a 2-pulse note connected to a 1-pulse note, we simply hold that for 3 pulses. There's one other way to write a 3-pulse note. This is a symbol for a 3-pulse note. It is a 2-pulse note with a dot beside it, and this symbol, or this note, represents 3 pulses. Let's think about how many different ways we could now write a 3-pulse measure. We know now how to draw a 1-pulse note, a 2-pulse note, and a 3-pulse note. Go ahead and draw some bar lines on a piece of paper in front of you and see how many different combinations of notes, or see how many different ways that you can write a measure with 3 pulses. What different ways could you add 1-pulse or 2-pulse or 3-pulse notes to some measures to make them 3-pulse measures? Go ahead and try that.
So there's a couple different ways, 4 different ways to write a 3-pulse measure. So let's talk about those 4 different ways. Let's draw a bar line here first. And one of the ways that we can write a 3-pulse measure is simply to write 3 1-pulse notes and then another bar line. And that is one measure because a measure is the distance from one bar line to the next bar line. And we see that we have 3 pulses in this measure. Another way to write a 3-pulse measure is to write one 3-pulse note in a measure and then add a bar line. Another way to write a 3-pulse measure is to write a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. And there's another measure with 3 pulses. And last, we could write a very similar measure, except put a 1-pulse note first and then a 2-pulse note, followed by a bar line. So there are some different combinations and different ways that we can write a 3-pulse measure. Let's go ahead and look again at this measure with our 3 1-pulse notes. How would this sound, or let's listen to what this kind of measure would sound like. Let's look at the second measure that we wrote, just a single 3-pulse note in this measure. So let's listen to what a measure with one 3-pulse note would sound like. And here's our third kind of measure where we have a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. Let's listen to what this measure would sound like repeated a couple times. And finally, let's listen to what this measure would sound like repeated a couple times. This is a 1-pulse note followed by a 2-pulse note. So listen and let's see what this combination of notes sounds like repeated a couple times. Let's work on a time dictation, and we've done a couple of these in the past. This is where I will play a rhythm on the piano. I want you to listen to the rhythm and then write out the rhythm on a piece of paper in front of you. So first I'll tell you that this rhythm is going to be 4 measures long and there's going to be 3 pulses in each measure. So let's go ahead and let's draw out our 4 measures. So we need 5 bar lines. Since this is going to be 4 measures long, let's go ahead and get our measures written down. And then first, let's just listen to the entire rhythm. So I would encourage you not to write anything yet. Go ahead and just listen to the full rhythm, and then we will go back and work on this, work through it together, measure by measure, until we finish this dictation. So here is the full rhythm. Go ahead and listen. Let's listen one more time, and then we'll start working through it measure by measure. Okay, let's break this apart. Let's work on the first measure. So here is the first measure of this dictation. See if you can listen for 1-pulse, 2-pulse, or 3-pulse notes and write them out. Here is the first measure. And here it is again. And here it is again. Okay, so our first measure is ta, 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 ta. So what did you hear? Go ahead and write that down. Our first measure is a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. Let's go ahead and listen to our second measure. And listen again. And one more time. I hear ta. Is that what you hear? So our second measure is a 3-pulse note. Let's go ahead and listen to our third measure. Here's the third measure. Let's listen to that again. And one more time. Here's our third measure. Ta, ta. Is that what you hear? Ta, ta. Go ahead and try to write out that third measure. It is the same as our first measure. Let's go to our fourth measure. So here is our final measure. And let's listen to that measure again. And one more time, here's our fourth measure. And I hear ta. Go ahead and write down the fourth measure. It is another 3-pulse note. So now that we have all 4 of these measures written out, let's go ahead and listen to the full rhythm again. Let's finish our rhythm for today and our study on pulses with one final time dictation. So we've done these multiple times, just like we did a little bit ago, except this time I'm going to play the melody of a song, and I want you to write down the rhythm. So this melody is 8 measures long, and each of the measures has 3 pulses. So let's go ahead and write enough bar lines for 8 measures. So I'm going to have 4 measures on top, 4 measures on bottom. You can do one long line of measures, that's completely fine. But we need 8 measures total, and 3 pulses will be in each measure. So we'll have opportunities or options for 1 pulse and 2 pulse and 3 pulse notes. And like in the past, I'm going to play the entire melody through, and you can just listen to it, or if you want to start writing down the rhythm that you hear, that's completely fine too. I will play it through a couple times, and then we will work through it measure by measure, 1 measure at a time. So here is the melody, and go ahead and just listen, and then we'll work through it measure by measure. So here's the full melody. Okay, let's listen to that one more time. If you want to start writing out the rhythm, feel free. Otherwise, you can wait until we work through it measure by measure. All right, let's go back to measure 1. Let's listen just to measure 1. And here it is again. Write down what you hear. Let's listen again to measure 1. Okay, for measure 1, we hear a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. Let's go on to measure 2. Here is measure 2. And here it is again. Let's listen to it one more time. For measure 2, even though it's different sounds on the piano, it's the same rhythm again. It's a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. Here is measure 3. Here's measure 3 again. And one more time. The rhythm of measure 3 is 3 1-pulse notes. Let's listen to measure 4. And here it is again. One more time, what do you hear? So for measure 4, all we hear is 1 3-pulse note. Let's go on to measure 5. Here it is again. And one more time. This one is a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. Here is our next measure. Here it is again. With this measure, we only hear one sound lasting 3 pulses, so we would write a 3-pulse note. And the next measure, here it is again. And one more time. It's a somewhat familiar rhythm, hopefully by now. We have a 2-pulse note followed by a 1-pulse note. And here is our last measure. Here's our last measure again. And one more time. Once again, we only hear one sound in this measure, and it is 1 3-pulse note. Let's listen to the entire melody again. Follow along with the rhythm. See if you can hear the 1-pulse, 2-pulse, and 3-pulse notes so you can read your rhythm as you listen to this melody. That is it for today. I want to tell you good job for getting through that lesson. It was a long one. It had lots of new information and lots of new knowledge. And to make it this far is a wonderful thing. You are so much closer to learning how to make music on the piano. So good job. For this week, draw an 11-line staff. Do this a couple times. Label middle C, high F, and low G. These are the notes that span the entirety of the staff, and they're such good landmarks to know really well. And then once you label these sounds on the staff, then play them on the piano. Second of all, write out some 3 or 4 pulse measures and fill them up with 1, 2, or 3 pulse notes. Come up with multiple combinations and then play those rhythms through on the piano. And last of all, if you are enjoying it, continue playing through the Farmhouse.